Today, the Washington Commanders stood pat at the NFL trade deadline, choosing not to sell off any of their veteran players in exchange for future draft capital. And today, on the Commanders Report, what I've got for you guys is what this means for the Washington Commanders' future strategy in terms of team building. Are they going to continue to try and win now in the future? Or are they going to try and rebuild? I've got my answer for you guys coming up later in today's show, so make sure you guys stick around. But get us started down there in the comments section. Did the Washington Commanders make the right call by standing pat this year at the deadline? Give me a yes if you think they made the right call, or type no if you think they should have made some trades. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. And with that, let's get into the show. So like I said, guys, today the Washington Commanders stood pat at the NFL trade deadline, and despite reportedly quite a bit of interest in some of their players currently on the roster, Adam Peters decided to not trade those players away and keep them on the roster, not adding any draft capital for the 2026 NFL Draft. And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I'm disappointed in Adam Peters for not selling more aggressively today. It sounded like he was open to trading some players, but it sounded like he had, his price tag that he was willing to let those players go for, and, no one was willing to meet that price tag. So he was obviously selling high on these players, but I don't see why he was doing that. There's a couple players, we'll talk about a couple of those players that I think he should have sold off today that he did not. And the reason why I want them to do that is because not only is the season over, sitting at 3-6, but you only have 6 draft picks next year in the NFL Draft, and only 2 of them come in the first 4 rounds, when usually you get your starter quality talent. I mean, you got some dart throws in the middle and in late day 3, a couple draft picks in round 6 and 1 in round 7, and then of course one in round 5. But just having a pick in round 1 and just having a pick in round 3 in the first 4 rounds, especially with this team that desperately needs an injection of young talent, I just felt like there was opportunities today to even get a couple more dart throws on day 3 with a couple of the veterans you have on the roster. And 2 guys in particular that I thought probably did have some interest today that Peters just didn't come to the table for. One of them being Deebo Samuel. And, I think the Buffalo Bills were showing some interest in him. The Pittsburgh Steelers were showing some interest in him. But according to reports, they needed a day 2 draft pick to get rid of a 29-year-old player that is on an expiring deal. No one's paying a fucking day 2 draft pick for Deebo Samuel, man. But could you have gotten your return on investment on him with a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick, and got something out of him before he leaves in free agency this offseason? I mean, are we really going to keep him around in the future? That's really the big question. And, I just don't think that, it makes sense to give another contract to Deebo Samuel to keep him around here in Washington unless he takes a major discount. But it just seems like Deebo is well on his way at this point to being a free agent. This season is over, so why not get what you can out of him? It seemed like there were some teams interested, but Adam Peters was just trying to play hardball and tried to sell him for a day 2 pick, a price tag that nobody was going to meet. And then Andrew Wiley, another guy that reportedly was getting a lot of interest around the league. Probably could have traded him for some sort of 7th round pick or, a late round pick swap or something like that. You really could have let him go. But, could you really not find a deal to get Andrew Wiley? Is that really not a good enough price tag for somebody that's over the hill, somebody that you're not going to be able to trade, or his value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now? I get that he's good offensive line depth, and if there's an injury on the offensive line, you want somebody that you trust to go in there. But, this season's over. It's Andrew Wiley shouldn't be a long-term answer on the offensive line anyway. This should be a player that you should be trading for a late-round selection to get another dart throw there at the table during the 2026 NFL Draft. And it just disappoints me that Adam Peters was playing hardball here with a couple of players that I think were pretty much no-brainer sell options at the NFL trade deadline today, and he doesn't come up with any additional draft picks. Now, coming up here on the Commanders Report, I'm going to let you guys know what standing pat at the trade deadline today means for the future of the Washington Commanders and what I believe their future team-building strategy will be heading into the 2025 offseason based on their behavior right now. But before we get into the rest of today's show, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action is even better this football season with our friends at Prize Picks. It's a free app that you can download on your phone right now. And as the weather is changing, guys, the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep this season rolling on, even though the Commander season is is over with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the Flex Play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the Power Play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. This weekend, here for the Sunday Night Football matchup between the Steelers and Chargers, I am taking the more on Aaron Rodgers' passing yards. I'm taking the more on rushing yards for Jaylen Warren and the less on Justin Herbert passing yards. This is a power play, by the way, so I have to get all 3 of these right. If I get them right, then I'm going to be getting a pretty decent payout from our friends at Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, what I believe standing pat here and kind of holding on to your veterans at this point in the season means for the Washington Commanders down the road is that it's certainly possible, and I could certainly see this happening, where they continue this quote-unquote win-now strategy moving into the 2026 season. Now, I know a lot of Commanders fans out there, and really including myself, I lean this way as well. I want a full-scale rebuild. I want a full-scale fire sale, followed by getting more draft picks, followed by drafting some younger players and injecting this talent with more young players so that you can take a step back, so you can take 2 steps forward and get yourself in a position to potentially compete for Super Bowls down the line with Jayden Daniels. And, I think if you're not in a win-now mindset, why keep older veterans that are getting to the point where their contracts are getting towards the end, like Laramie Tunsil, who's under contract for 1 more season, but might be wanting an extension next offseason, and Daron Payne, who also might be looking for an extension next offseason, unless you actually plan on keeping these guys around. And obviously these guys can help you win some football games down the stretch here in Washington and maybe try and keep this season alive, whatever. But, at 3-6 with a backup quarterback likely in the rest of the way, I think if you could have got, the 2nd and 4th round pick in this year's NFL draft that you gave away for Tunsil in a trade, and you could have got those picks back in a trade, I would have thought about that. If you could have got, maybe a late day 2 draft pick for Daron Payne, I would have thought about that. And if they did make those moves, that would be an indication that they are going to be full-scale rebuilding this organization moving forward. I mean, just look at what the Jets did today. They traded away some of their really big-name pieces that they just don't see as long-term fits inside their building. And keeping older veterans like Laramie Tunsil and Daron Payne certainly points to this team still continuing to try and win Super Bowls and capitalize on Jayden Daniels being on a rookie contract. And, Washington, absolutely could still trade, guys like Laramie Tunsil and Daron Payne in the offseason. It's still they still have plenty of time to embrace a full-scale rebuild. Like, we could get to next offseason and Laramie, demands a trade out or wants a new contract, and the Commanders don't want to give him that. Daron Payne, I'm guessing, is going to want an extension next year, and I'm not sure if the Commanders are going to want to pay that. So it's absolutely possible that they just didn't get the price tag on these guys that they wanted today, but they're going to, try their luck in the offseason to try and unload these players and really kickstart that rebuild. But with that said, the reason why I think the Washington Commanders could still embrace that win-now philosophy they embraced this season with is because of Jayden Daniels and his rookie contract. He is definitely going to be expected to be back for next season at the start of the 2026 campaign. He's still going to be on his rookie contract, and he'll be on a cost-controlled contract for at least the next 3 seasons, okay? And, that gives the Commanders cap flexibility to go out and get some more expensive veterans to fill out this roster and try and make a push for at least 1 Super Bowl before Jayden Daniels' 2nd contract kicks in with the football team. And as crazy as it sounds, man, if you can keep Terry McLaurin healthy in 2026, if you can keep your defensive ends healthy in 2026, if you can make some good draft picks, if you can make some if you're successful in free agency and on the trade market pre-draft, I really do think that this team is just a year and just a good offseason away from being a dangerous team in 2026. I truly do believe that. Like I said, guys, you've got, a couple draft picks. You could make some trades to maybe get some more. But right now, what I'd say is the 6 areas of the roster that I think you definitely need to address next year. Tyler Biadasz, you have to decide whether or not to bring him back. He's a free agent next year at center. Wide receiver, I think you need to put another legitimate route runner on the other side outside of Terry McLaurin. Okay, and then inside linebacker, obviously I think you have to replace Bobby Wagner, but honestly I think you might want to replace Frankie Louvu and completely revamp that off-ball linebacker position this offseason. Slot corner, don't think Mike Sainristil is going to be a fit there long term. Try moving him outside or just move on from him entirely. Quan Martin, I'm also ready to give up on him. He has been awful this year. Get a new free safety, get a new strong safety, and really just completely revamp, especially the second and third levels of the Commanders' defense. That needs to be done this next offseason if this team is going to make any sort of changes and improvements heading into 2026 on defense. And then some potential areas of need, running back potentially. We'll see if Bill Krosky-Merritt can establish himself as this team's bona fide number one guy this offseason, and you can always use more running back depth. Tight end, Zach Ertz, I'm guessing, is going to retire at the end of the season. Also would have really loved to see the Commanders sell him off to a contender because, if this is going to be his final season, it's kind of a sad way for Zach Ertz to go out, if I'm being completely honest with you. But you have to figure out if Ben Sinnott is going to be your future at number one tight end or not, or whether you want to go out and get somebody else. Left guard is definitely a big question mark. Chris Paul has not played well over the last couple weeks. Brandon Coleman, is he going to be a potential answer there long term? You got to figure that out and that position out. Outside corner, obviously Marshawn Lattimore, I think is going to be getting cut at the end of this season, which is going to open up a lot of cap space for you, by the way. But who's going to be that other outside corner outside of Trey Amos? It could be Mike Sainristil, so your solution to that position could already be on the roster. He played pretty well on the outside his rookie season. I'm hoping Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. give him an opportunity to play on the outside while Lattimore misses the rest of this season with a ACL tear, to kind of give him a tryout to be this team's number two corner moving forward. And then defensive end, you're just pretty old at that spot. And, Dorrance Armstrong slated to be back this next year, but I think you probably do need to get younger on the defensive end spot as well. So obviously there's a lot of areas that this team needs to address in the offseason, but they have the draft picks, okay? If they make some trades, they could certainly get some more draft picks before the draft happens. And then they're going to have they're projected to have over $100 million in projected 2026 cap space. Now, they had a lot of cap space this offseason and chose not to use a lot of it for some reason. I thought, looking back in hindsight, from this 2025 offseason, it was a bad offseason from Adam Peters. It just was. There were some good things. I thought the Javon Kinlaw signing was a good one. Bill Krosky-Merritt in the 7th round was a good one. Trey Amos, I think, was a good first-round pick. There was good things about the offseason. But you didn't do enough. The fact that the Commanders still sit with the third most cap space in the league, I think shows you that you could have done a lot more in a win-now season to fill out the roster. And if you can kind of learn from your mistakes in 2025 and you really hit the nail on the head in 2026, it is possible, in my opinion, for this team to turn around in one season and go from contender to pretender and big time, mega booty ass cheeks this year to right back towards the top of the division next year. I really do think that that's in the cards for this team if they play their cards right this offseason. So what should the Commanders do? Should they go and continue to try and win now and fill this team up with veteran talent to surround Jaden Daniels? Or do you think they should rip this thing down to the studs and rebuild around Jaden Daniels, take a step backwards next offseason so that they can go 2 steps forward? I think there's a good case to be made for both sides, guys. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. W for win now, R for rebuild. Let's see which one gets the most votes. That'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Type those real ones down there in the comment section if you made it to the end of today's show and if you are with this team no matter what and you bleed burgundy and gold. That'll be it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, out to the Commanders.